Welcome to Codex, History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today, we're getting into a little discussion on backwards compatibility. This is straight from the episode ideas list. This is a listener-submitted idea.
Thanks, listeners. This is kind of a little bit of a hybrid episode. We'll have some discussion here, but I've got a bit of history I want to cover here because I think it will inform our discussion around backward compatibility, because I think the history of something like backward compatibility is very important in determining the future of it, because it's so legacy focused. Like, you know, if we're talking about preserving history, we need to know about the history of preserving history, like the meta history.
Preserveception, if you will.
Yeah, it's preserving all the way down.
Oh man, Delilah's really going to start running the microphone. Oh, and there she is. I'm sorry, everybody. We're going to have to deal with it. We're going to have to deal with the podcast producer today. She's just in a mood. I don't know what to do.
Hey, well, you know, sometimes that's the way it goes. But I'm sure she'll contribute in a positive way.
She has a lot of thoughts on backwards compatibility. So, and I'm not going to edit this out. So we're going to just have her be in here.
Cats generally do. So, yeah. Backward compatibility goes back as long as computers have been a thing. And even further, actually, as long as electronics have been a thing. And if you want to really stretch the definition, it probably goes even back further than that, when people were making, you know, machines, and like, if you got a new style of wagon and you're going to put a new wheel on it, maybe you want to make it compatible with old wheels too, you know? I don't know. That's probably a thing, though, for wagons, backward compatibility. This isn't the
wagon history podcast,
yeah.
though.
In terms of electronics, it goes back as far as like the FM radio, and maybe even further. It's like if you want to stretch this definition, like new light bulbs and old sockets and things like that. But a really good example of backward compatibility in the olden days is with FM radio. So when FM radio first came out, it was mono, like it was just one channel of audio, and we loved it, and nobody wanted anything else. But then stereo was introduced, so you could have two speakers, and each speaker could have something different coming out of it, right? So songs could take advantage of two channels of audio, and I think this even extended out into four channels at some point, although I don't think that's very common. But when stereo was introduced, it was done in such a way that older mono radios could still pick up a full signal. So FM radio stations would broadcast one signal that was both the left and right channels combined into one thing, so that when you listened to it on your mono radio, you heard the whole thing or the whole song, right? And then there was another signal being broadcast that was the difference between those two channels. So by taking this one signal that is the difference between the two combined channels, you could create two separate channels if you were using a stereo FM radio that knew how to do that kind of thing, which I think is actually pretty cool, because the other way to do it would have been to just be like, well, we'll just broadcast the right channel separately, and if you're listening on an old radio, I guess it sucks, you only get the left channel or something like that. And I think it's actually cool that they did it in a way that old radios would get the combined signal. So that's pretty neat, and I really like that.
That is really neat.
And it meant that for the end user, like whether you have a stereo or a mono radio, you get to listen to the whole song without missing anything, which is pretty cool. So that's it for this episode of Codex History of Radio. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
I would do a radio history podcast if you wanted to. I'll listen to you talk about the radio all the day. I love the radio.
Oh, so do I. I used to work in the radio. I don't know if I've said that on the podcast before, but back in the day, I used to work.
I knew that about you.
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a affinity for radio. But in a more relevant context to us, the video game nerds, computer systems have often needed backward compatibility to ease the transition from older machines to newer ones. So for machines that are in like a production capacity, that's like doing a job that you're making money off of, it's not feasible to switch everything out all at once just because a new computer came out, right? If a user could move to a new system but still run their old software, which would hopefully eventually be updated, although I'm sure there are still machine shops running DOS machines, and like the machine runs off of this really old program and it's never stopped working, so they just never updated it. But if a user could move to this new system and then still run the old software, they'd be able to smooth that transition, and hardware manufacturers could keep moving forward with technology and also sell new technology, which is what they would want to do.
Yeah, I going back to that whole like computers that are running like DOS, there's definitely places that still run that. There's gotta be. I feel like I went somewhere recently where I'm like, are you still running Windows 95? Like, it just looked like, what are you doing?
Yeah, for a long time, like fast food places, I guess now that most of those have moved to like touchscreen things, it's newer now. But when I worked at Wendy's in the mid 2000s, we were definitely using like green screen like, I don't know if it was an Apple II or what it was running on, but it was definitely something from the 80s, which was old even in the olden times for me. I think that's all been updated now, but like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, that kind of thing. So
yeah, especially if you like have a system down and it works for you, then whatever. And
yeah,
most people would throw those away anyway. So good for you for not just throwing waste away that you could still use, I guess.
Right. So early computers would often work with the software of their predecessors, especially if the predecessor was extremely popular. Like the Apple IIe was compatible with the Apple II, the Apple II Plus as well. The 2GS was compatible with everything Apple II. The Apple III even ran software for the Apple II Plus as well. The Commodore 128 was compatible with the popular Commodore 64. So newer computers in the same sort of line would often be compatible with the older stuff so that somebody could get rid of their old computer and still run their old software. But in the video game world, it gets a little bit more dicey early on. Things like the follow-up to the Atari 2600, the 5200, would run 2600 games with a converter. What I think is really funny about this era is that competitors ColecoVision and Intellivision would also run Atari 2600 games with converters,
really?
Which is like something almost absolutely unheard of these days. I'm trying to think obviously there are no converters that will let you run Xbox games on a PlayStation, but the Dreamcast did have a couple of like unauthorized emulators released for it, but in a commercial capacity where you would boot the Dreamcast off of one disc and it would load up the emulator software, and then you'd put in your PlayStation 1 game. I think there were like 3 supported ones. I want to say it was like Gran Turismo 2, Metal Gear Solid, and like one other game, and you put in your PlayStation 1 disc, and then you would get to play that game on your Dreamcast, which I think is pretty cool. But
yeah, I kind of miss these old weird converter things.
Yeah.
It wasn't a converter, but for me, I think about like plugging in the cartridge to the Game Shark and then putting the Game Shark in. That kind of weird step. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's exactly like that. Only this would let your ColecoVision or Intellivision play Atari 2600 games, which made them good upgrades to the Atari 2600 because they were better systems, and they advertised themselves as being better systems. So you could get rid of your Atari 2600 and upgrade to an awesome Intellivision or ColecoVision and still play your 2600 games. It was a different time back then for this kind of stuff. There would probably be so many legal challenges to that now, and there may have been legal challenges to it back in the day. That would be something that would be fun to dive into, a history of video game lawsuits. Write that down. We gotta put that on the episode.
I'm writing that down right now, so I'll write that on there. Don't worry about it.
The Sega Master System could also run older Sega games. I'm not too familiar with older systems besides the Master System. There was like the SG 1000 and 2000 and 3000, I think, which I guess were in the same era of like the 2600 and that kind of stuff. But it would run older games with a few caveats. And then the Genesis, or the Mega Drive, for those of you outside the US, did come with an adapter to run the Master System games, at least early on in the system's life cycle. It came with another, like a Game Shark thing where you would plug your Master System game into it. And I want to say there was something like that available for the Game Gear as well, because the Game Gear was actually hardware compatible with the Master System. Like games didn't require any sort of modification in software to run on a Game Gear. So you could I think there was a converter that would let you do that, but I could be wrong about the converter. Nintendo, though, notably, was not interested in backward compatibility for its home consoles until the Wii in 2006. Super Nintendo couldn't play NES games. The N64 and GameCube couldn't play anything from before either, which seemed like normal to me at the time, because of course you can't play, the games don't fit, right? But it was not normal in those games. Like the PS2 played PS1 games. The Dreamcast didn't play Saturn games though, but which is kind of weird because the formats were at least physically compatible. But like the Genesis, like we said, played Master System games. The PS1 didn't have anything to be backward compatible with, but if it did, I'm sure it would have been. Nintendo did value backward compatibility pretty heavily in their handhelds, which I think is interesting. I wonder what the strategy there was of like, why not do it for the home consoles, but make sure to do it for the handhelds?
Well, I remember I did buy Game Boy Color games to play on my Advance. So it worked in that way. I actually bought stuff for my Advance that were not Game Boy Advance games because I was a kid and I'm like, I just really want to play Heroes of Might and Magic. That's what I want to do. Yeah,
and I don't care about the if it's an old game or not. I just want to play it. So like the Game Boy Color played any Game Boy game, although some people don't consider the Game Boy Color to be its own like generation of Game Boy. I kind of do because it did have exclusives, and I think color was a pretty big addition. But anyway, Game Boy Color played any Game Boy game and would even add color to older games. Not always in the best way, but it would do that. The Game Boy Advance played all older Game Boy games as well, except for the Game Boy Micro, which only played Game Boy Advance games.
I never knew anyone that owned a Micro.
Me neither. It came out in like 2006. It was like a couple years after, maybe it was 5. It was a couple years after the DS was out. So it was like this sort of budget thing for, I think it was more for like little kids. It was really small. Like I couldn't, as an adult, it's too small to play games on. It's just like, I would much rather play my Game Boy Advance games on a DS, or a DS Lite is like the dream. But I did know a little kid that had a Game Boy Micro. That's it. I only knew one little kid with a Game Boy Micro. But even when Nintendo abandoned the Game Boy style cartridges for the DS in favor of like those cards, like they're not SD cards, but they kind of have a similar form factor, they dedicated an entire slot to GBA games, which I thought was very interesting. It didn't work with anything older than GBA games, but it also doubled as an accessory port for a few of the accessories that the DS had. So maybe that's what they were thinking when they did that. They were like, well, if we put this cartridge slot in it, we can use it for other stuff too. The backward compatibility was made possible through the inclusion of GBA hardware inside the DS, which would play the software directly without having to rely on like emulation or anything like that. So they definitely deliberately designed the DS with the Game Boy in mind of being able to play Game Boy games. So, and that was a time where they didn't have to do that. Like the Game Boy Color playing old Game Boy games makes sense. It was kind of just an upgraded Game Boy. The Game Boy Advance makes a little bit more sense, even though it was a fully different hardware setup, different architecture and all that stuff. But for the DS, they could have just abandoned Game Boy games, and I think nobody would have really cared that much, but they made the extra effort to do that, which I thought was interesting considering they'd never done that on their consoles. The DSi dropped that port, but still retained compatibility with DS titles. And then the 3DS also retains full DS compatibility. So older DS games slot right into your 3DS. They work no problem. No Game Boy slot on your 3DS, though. By then, it was long gone. In 2006, though, Nintendo did offer backward compatibility with GameCube titles on the Wii, because the Wii was really just like a souped-up GameCube in terms of hardware. But they did include memory card and controller ports, which were also helpful for the games on the Wii that didn't benefit from motion controls as much, like Smash Bros. You could play with a GameCube controller. I think Mario Kart you could also play with a GameCube controller, and there were a few other games that would also work with that. The Wii did offer, and this was kind of new at the time, like this was not really a thing that the game companies did, but it had a huge library of older games to purchase on the Virtual Console. So you could buy them online, they would download to your console, and you could play older games on your Wii. It wasn't directly backward compatible. It wasn't like you could just put your Super Nintendo game into your Wii, but you could pay Nintendo for the privilege of playing games you already owned on your Wii, or games you didn't own because you didn't have to own it to buy the Virtual Console version. And then the Wii U also, this was carried through to the Wii U, and then to a lesser extent on the 3DS Virtual Console. 3DS has like a smaller subset. It's mostly handheld focused. I think there's like Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games and stuff on the 3DS Virtual Console. And then the Switch has the Nintendo Network subscription, which has a much smaller subset of games on it, but they're sort of all you can eat. You just pay a monthly fee and you can access all of the games on the system. So
yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like really way cheaper than other online services too. At least it was. They upped the price when they added the 64 library, but
yeah,
it's still pretty cheap for what you pay.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I consider that like backwards compatibility in the strictest sense. Like, I guess it's old software running on a newer system, but when I think of backward compatibility, I think like I have this game already. I want to use the copy of it that I already have in my new thing, and it just works. That's kind of what I think of as backward compatibility. Because otherwise, PCs are backward compatible with everything because emulators exist for everything, right?
Yeah. What you're talking original hardware like the game goes into the hardware and it works. Like cartridges or whatever, exactly. Or discs. Exactly. Yeah. When
I want to play Super Mario Land on my Game Boy Advance, I take my old Super Mario Land cartridge that I got for Christmas in 1995 and I plug it into my Game Boy Advance that I got in the summer of 2001. Right? Like, and it just works. I don't have to pay anybody anything for it. There's no software I need to download. Nothing. So yeah. Sony also valued backward compatibility for the full PS2 era. They included PS1 hardware in the PS2 to make that happen. And they did this in kind of an interesting way because the PS1 hardware controls the input and output system while PS2 games are in operation. So like it controlled, controller inputs coming in, and I think memory cards and stuff like that. So it had a use outside of running just PS1 games, because sometimes old hardware gets included and it's only used to run old software. And that's why Sony never removed it from the PS2. Every single PS2 plays every single PS1 game. I think there's a few exceptions of like PS1 games that run kind of weird on a PS2, like single digit number of PS1 games that run weird.
Which is pretty good for the hundreds and hundreds of games that have come out for those systems, yeah. Yeah,
that's super good. So yeah, like the DS included GBA hardware, but as far as I know, it didn't do anything besides run Game Boy Advance games. Early PS3 revisions included the full Emotion Engine CPU and graphics synthesizer from the PS2 for backward compatibility. That didn't have any other purpose inside there. And as we saw in that generation, as it went on, and the need for smaller, cheaper systems became Sony's priority, they started to remove that hardware from later PS3 revisions. So there's a revision of fat PS3s that doesn't have the Emotion Engine CPU, but does still have the graphics chip from the PS2 in it. So it's like partial software emulation, where the Emotion Engine CPU is emulated on the PS3's cell processor. And then later, they removed it altogether by pulling out the GPU as well. And that's how they got the price of the PS3 down, because that was one thing that they really needed to do in that generation to compete with Microsoft, was get the price down, because the PS3 for that entire generation was more expensive than an Xbox 360. All PS3s can play PS1 games, though, because that was always done in software. There's no hardware needed for that. So even if you have a PS3 that doesn't play PS2 games, it still plays PS1 games. You just pop the disc right in, runs it in software. That's like a sort of weird gray area for me when it comes to like the technical definition of backward compatibility, because I can play my old Final Fantasy VII disc from 1997 in my PS3, but it's not running on actual hardware inside the PS3. It's designed for that purpose. It's running in a software emulator. So, I'll take it though.
Yeah, I'll take that too.
Yeah. The PS4 dropped all pretense of backward compatibility, including PS1 games, which was a pretty big step back, because PS1 games were always done in software anyway on the PS3, like I just said, and they didn't even have that on the PS4. PS4 just plays PS4 games. That's it. There are some games you can download like for PS2 from the store that are like, I think, in kind of a weird gray area of whether or not we consider that backward compatible or if it's a port. I'm not really sure. But the PS5 is backward compatible with PS4 games because it's just a faster PS4. So it just runs PS4 games, and it oftentimes will run those PS4 games better than the PS4 did, especially when the developer puts out like a PS5 patch for it, which is always great. I love when that happens. And I think that's just because the PS5 and PS4 are a similar PC-based architecture. In fact, the Xbox One and Xbox Series systems run on a very similar architectures to the PS4 and PS5, although we don't see any conversion software or hardware available for those systems to run like in the ColecoVision or the Intellivision days.
That'd be hilarious if they did, though. Imagine how mad they would get at each other for that.
Yeah. Oh. Imagine if Xbox just got an update that was just like, yep, we play PS4 games now, and you could just pop your PS4 disc in.
And then just Sony, just all the lawyers start marching everywhere.
Yeah. That would be a very interesting legal battle. Depending on how Microsoft did it, I think there's a way for them to do that legally. Like if they don't use any intellectual property from Sony to build that compatibility, I think that would be totally legal. I mean, it would just be emulation, right? And like emulation on a PC is totally legal. Yeah.
Yeah. That's true. Did you just crack the code?
Maybe.
To who wins the console wars? And I'm using that with the biggest air quotes in the entire world, just so everyone knows.
I don't think that would be in Microsoft's best interest. I don't think they want to be selling PS4 games. Like, they're not in the business of selling a console. They're in the business of selling games for that console, right? Like, we've talked about this is the give away the razor to sell the blades model, right? Mm-hmm. Like, they actually don't want you buying PS4 games to play on your Xbox One because they don't get any money from that. So that would actually not be in Microsoft's best
it would
interest.
just be like an extra bonus that would just get Microsoft in the biggest legal hot water of their lives. And that's saying something because they're Microsoft.
It would sell consoles and not guarantee games get sold for that console. And so they would actually lose money from that in some situations. So, but it would be cool. I would love it. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, speaking of Xbox, we can do a quick history of backward compatibility on the Xbox as well. The first one didn't have anything to be backward compatible with, although Sega did try to get them to add Dreamcast compatibility, kind of as a last-ditch effort to preserve the Dreamcast legacy, because the Xbox was like coming out kind of around the same time as the Dreamcast was like getting canceled. And so Sega was like, please, make the Xbox the Dreamcast too. And they were unsuccessful, partially because Bill Gates did not want to add online functionality for Dreamcast titles, which I think is kind of strange considering how they led the charge with online functionality for Xbox titles. But he was like, nah, we're not doing it for Dreamcast games. So they ended up, that whole deal ended up falling through. But I thought that would have been interesting if you could have popped your Dreamcast games into your Xbox to play them. That's kind of cool.
That'd been really cool. And honestly, it would have like shown some love between Sega and Microsoft, which probably would have gotten Sega making games more for Microsoft. I just, it's an interesting thing to me that he made that choice, especially with the fact that you added the Ethernet port in the back of it.
Right. And I think like back in those days, Microsoft, like nowadays, obviously Microsoft, when they have a ton of like clout in the console industry, but back in that day, people were like kind of unsure of whether the Xbox would be any good, right? It was like, is this console from Microsoft going to be any good? All the other hardware that Microsoft has made, like web TV and stuff, like that stuff never panned out. That could have just been a flash in the pan. The Xbox was nothing, right? But if Sega was like, oh no, but here you can play Dreamcast games on it, and here's a bunch of Sega games for it, and we're going to make games for the Xbox, like that would have offered it like a sense of legitimacy, I guess, in those days, which I think it needed at the time. But they didn't get that. Sega still made games for the Xbox, but we did not see a bunch of Dreamcast games. They could have had a
closer partnership, you know? It would have been fun. Sonic would be just running around on an Xbox One. Xbox One? Sorry, Xbox. I said Xbox One, like original Xbox, like number one. That's wrong Xbox, because they're not really good with names, Xbox. I think we can all agree on that. It's very confusing.
The worst.
But yeah, the first Xbox would have had Sonic on it, and that would have been dope.
Yeah, well, it did. Sonic Heroes was on the original Xbox.
I don't want to talk about Sonic Heroes. I'm talking.
Okay, we don't consider that game.
I'm talking about like some sort of fast-paced original Sonic style, run around platform thing.
Oh yeah, it's not the Sonic Mega Collection was on there. I guess it was just a bunch of old Sonic games though.
Yeah,
but yeah, there was no like good Sonic game that was on the Xbox, unless you count Sonic Heroes, which sounds like you don't. So
I never played it. I just want, my childhood. You know how I feel, Tyler. I'm so nostalgic now for the way it was.
Yeah, I get you. Sonic Heroes was not a great game. But the Xbox 360 did retain some software backward compatibility with original Xbox games. And I think it's about half the original Xbox library playable on the Xbox 360. And certainly most of like the good titles that you'd actually want to play, like the Halo games are all there.
Elder Scrolls Morrowind?
Yep, Morrowind's
worked
there.
On it. Yeah, I remember playing that on there.
Most of the good stuff is there. Most of the stuff that doesn't run is like not as good, with a few exceptions. I'm still sad that Unreal Championship doesn't run on the Xbox 360. That's a real bummer for me.
Do you have an original Xbox?
I do. Yeah, I have two actually.
Oh yeah, because you got a magical one, if I recall, right?
Yeah, I got one from a thrift store a while back, and I have my original Xbox that I got after the 360 came out. I came in late to the Xbox thing. Has a big old 2 terabyte hard drive with every Xbox game on it that I own legally, of course.
Always legally.
Yeah. But it has a lot of games loaded on that hard drive, and it's pretty sweet. It takes a long time to boot up and like list out all the games on there. I probably overdid it.
It's got to think about it for a little bit. It's like trying so. I was like, I'm trying so hard for you, Tyler. Just give me a second. Just give me a second. I just got to count all the games here. I'm trying to find Bloodwake. I can't find Bloodwake. It's on here somewhere.
The Xbox One, when it came out, didn't have any sort of backward compatibility when it first came out, but in 2015. Microsoft, like at E3, made this huge push for backward compatibility of older Xbox titles, with original games being included, 360 games, and this is done kind of through a mix of like software emulation, and there's recompilation that's happening too. Like Microsoft has to go out and get permission from the developers or the publishers of games to put them on Xbox One, because I think they actually make changes to the software to make it run on the Xbox One. So like, I guess if you want to I consider it backward compatibility because you can take your disc that you got 20 years ago and pop it in your Xbox One and play SSX3.
I think that counts still, even though it's like, is it emulated like that you were talking about before with the PlayStation 1?
I think
it still counts. I think that counts.
Yeah, but it is the best way to play SSX3 because it runs in 4K and like 60 frames per second. It just runs super smoothly. Also, maybe the best way to play Morrowind, and if you're not playing on a PC, because I think it also runs at 4K on an Xbox One X or a Series X.
This is so. When they did that, they started doing those. I thought that was so cool that they're like 4King all these old games for you. That's just really neat.
Yeah, they made a big deal out of that, and I think they got a lot of like goodwill because I don't know how much money they made off of that. Maybe from selling older games, they being able to sell old 360 and original Xbox games was
a lot of
worth
them. They
it for
put
them.
On Game Pass though, didn't they? Like I'm pretty sure they put Morrowind and stuff on Game Pass in 4K as part of the Bethesda deal. So I guess they did it and then they bought Bethesda. So maybe there was something going on there that they kind of knew what they were going to do or try to do. You know.
Yeah, maybe, or just being able, because like when that backward compatibility stuff came out, they started selling those games too. You could just, because this was before Game Pass, you could just buy SSX3 on the Xbox store and play it on your Xbox One. So they made money in that way, I guess. But I can't imagine they made a ton of money, but maybe it was enough. I'm glad they did it anyway. So
me too.
Yeah. The Xbox Series is just a souped up Xbox One, so of course it does everything the Xbox One does. It's similar to like PS5, PS4 compatibility. They're basically the same, just the series of consoles are just faster.
I like that you call it the Series.
The Series, yeah, because they're terrible at naming consoles.
They
just
really are.
Regular
it's like,
names at Microsoft.
I don't know why. I always called the old Xbox. And then when Xbox One came out, I started, for some reason, my mind started calling the original Xbox One. Like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Because you want to number them. And I mess it up all the time. It drives me crazy.
Yeah. Ugh. It's very dumb. So yeah, that's kind of a brief history of backward compatibility as it pertains to gaming. I'm sure there's stuff I missed in there. I'm sure there are details that we could also cover. But the reason I wanted to talk about that was to sort of set us up for a little bit of a discussion on how we feel about backward compatibility. What are our opinions on it? Is it necessary? Do we like it? Let's find out. Mike, what do you think about backwards compatibility?
I think most people like it. It's pretty unanimous to say that we like it, right?
Sure. I don't think anybody dislikes it.
Yeah, it's just an extra fun thing that you can save your games and play them. But is it necessary is a whole new thing because, like you said, especially with these like game subscription services, including a lot of the games that are older that I own, now is it really important if they're going to do that? You know, granted, now I have to pay more. You know, I am paying more money to play these games I already own. But I think it's necessary for the sake of game preservation.
Yeah.
Is how I'm going to put this, because this is my first thing I wrote down here, in that we're kind of losing the battle on saving old games. You know, it's a losing battle with time and how technology changes. And I think backwards compatibility is just one of those things that helps keep those games stick around. So in that sense, I think it's important. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it helps games. I think it helps games stick around. For me, when it comes to game preservation, the ultimate game preservation thing is emulation on a PC. Because even though the Xbox Series plays a bunch of old Xbox games, one day the Xbox Series, the last Xbox Series console, will turn on and it will turn off, and no one will ever turn it on again because it'll be 40 years, 100 years from now, right? And did Microsoft continue with this backward compatibility? Like, we've seen Sony break that, right? Like, PS2 games don't play on a PS5 even though they played on a PS3, right? So when you're relying on a company to sort of maintain that backward compatibility, I think as time goes on, that backward compatibility becomes a larger and larger burden for them to maintain. And so for me, I like to see emulators on PC because they're open source. They'll always be, well, they won't always be updated necessarily, but like as long as people have interest in them, they will continue to be updated. The games, you can store them yourself if you download them. Of course, only if you own them. So you can store them yourself. Like, these games will sort of always exist in the ether and they don't rely on a single company to keep them there. Like, if Microsoft says, you know what, we don't want to sell Morrowind anymore, they can take it down from Steam, they can take it down from Xbox, and nobody can buy Morrowind anymore, right? And that would be, if you were relying on Microsoft to preserve that game for you, it would no longer be preserved. But because you can download a disk image of it and play it on an Xbox emulator, or you can just play it on PC because as a PC version, you can download a disk image of the PC version, right? Like, I just like when it's more of a larger community to maintain things rather than relying on companies to maintain them. That said, like you said, it keeps those games alive a little bit longer when a company does do backward compatibility, which I don't hate either.
Yeah. Also, speaking of that whole like ROM thing and playing on computers, I just found out about like retros and other devices that let you like rip carts onto your computer. And so that's kind of something I think I'm personally going to do with all these N64 games I got, is rip the cartridges of those, because oh boy, I want to have those. I want to have like I want to have a digital library of my N64 games, because like the contacts are going to go bad on those eventually if I keep like going in and out and in and out. And they probably might be going bad already. Yeah. Truthfully. They're what now? Over 20 years old? 25 years old? N64? Yep. So yikes. Yeah. But
yeah, they're not going to last. They're not going to last forever. I think things like the retroed that you're talking about are less interesting from a cartridge preservation capacity, because those cartridges have already been ripped. They're online. You can download a ROM of any game that you already own, right? Unless you have some like ultra rare thing that's never been ripped before. Like,
unless you want to be really legal about it, you know.
Sure, I suppose so.
Super legal.
One thing I do think is cool about those is you can save your save files too. So if you've got an old save of Morrowind or on your N64 cartridge, which that game was not on N64, but you know, for the sake of argument, if you're playing some old RPG, you've got your characters they're very personalized to you, right? Like you're not just going to go download a save file online that is what you have. Being able to save that save file with a cartridge reader is very cool, I think, and probably worth it on its own. Less for the cartridge ripping functionality, because, you know, you can just go online and download every single Nintendo 64 game, and it's like 4 gigabytes for all of them.
So, Tyler, you just made two things pop into my brain. First, someone needs to make an N64 demake of Elder Scrolls Morrowind. Two, I was going to save this for the What You've Been Playing, but I bought a bunch of N64 games, right? I bought like 11 N64 games. One of them is Pokemon Snap. I lost my copy of Pokemon Snap. I don't know where it's at. I am in a philosophical conundrum right now, because the Pokemon Snap cartridge has a game save on it. Someone named Ricky was playing this.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to delete it, because that's Ricky's.
I know. I feel that way when I get like a Zelda game and I open it up and you see like Sam, Lisa, and Jordan, and you're like, oh man.
So I might
just delete Sam, Lisa, and Jordan's games.
Exactly. So I might buy one of these cartridge readers. There's one from something called Save the Heroes. There's both. You could buy the cartridge reader just from them and they'll ship it to you, or you can get a DIY kit to make it yourself.
Ooh, I like the DIY kits. I think those are like, that's cool to have, just to like have too, even if you're not doing anything with it. I just think like from a tech perspective, they're cool.
Yeah, me too. And so I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to do this so I can save Ricky's game.
That's a good idea.
On the Pokemon Snap. And then be like, you know what? I saved that for you, Ricky. Because I'm sure Ricky's going to come knocking on my door 30 years from now. Right? This person I've never met in my entire life that didn't even sell me these cartridges.
Yeah, this is like, you're the 7th person to own this since Ricky.
Probably, yeah. But that was a philosophical conundrum I ran into when I booted up the game, and I was like, oh man, it works. I can't wait to start playing. And then I'm like, welcome back, Ricky. And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that now.
Like I feel like a fraud. I feel like identity theft is not a joke, Mike.
That's right. I don't want to steal this person's identity. I'm not Ricky. My name's Michael. This is very confusing. So yeah.
Oh man, that's rough. It's like you boot up a Pokemon game and you see like 100 hours has been played, 300 hours has been played on this game. And you're like, well, sorry, Jeremy. I'm going to erase your game.
I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to this person. I don't even know this person.
That's nice of you.
I'm going to save it. Yeah, I just thought that was funny. And then you saying that the point of these cartridge readers is to save the games. I'm like, that's it. That's why I want one. Just to save it. Save Ricky. Yep.
You can save Ricky. Hashtag save Ricky.
Hashtag save Ricky.
Yeah.
All right, so I have another question for you, and this is like a personal question. What would be like the most heartbreaking game for you to lose because there's no backwards compatibility for it?
Are you talking about a game that is currently not backward compatible, or is, and I just don't want it to?
And you would like lose it. Or, I mean, if you have one that's not backwards compatible right now that you think about a lot, that would be fun too.
The biggest one that I think about a lot is Unreal Championship for the original Xbox, because it doesn't play on anything but the original Xbox, and the original Xbox emulator or there's like a couple of them now. They're really not very good yet, and I don't think any of them play Unreal Championship. I know that it's basically just Unreal Tournament 2003, but I just have like special nostalgia for playing Unreal Championship, I guess. That's the one that bums me out the most. The one that I would be bummed to lose backward compatibility with is SSX3, because I think playing it on Xbox One is at 4K is like the best way to play that game. It's like just super awesome. That game runs in GameCube and PS2 emulators, no problem. You play it at 16K resolution, whatever. So like if Microsoft decided they weren't doing it anymore, I'd be like, oh, darn it, but I could still play it, you know? And that's what I love about emulators and these things being preserved by a community, by the like game emulation and preservation community, is that they will never not be preserved once they're sort of there. Like Metal Gear Solid 4 now, that doesn't play on anything but a PS3. And but as the PS3 emulator gets more and more mature, it starts to work better and better. And I think that's really awesome. And it will never not work better and better, you know?
Yeah, that's true. Man, I think about all those 64 games. You know, if I lost Snowboard Kids, which I played recently, I played that. We're kind of doing the what you've been playing segment while we're talking, and that's okay. But I played that recently as my test to make sure my N64 still worked when I bought these new games. Yeah. And it still slaps. It still holds up perfectly. This is so Snowboard Kids 1, by the way, because Snowboard Kids 2 is $90 currently for just the cartridge.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I tried to get one, and it's $90.
Wow.
And I'm like, there's no way I can afford that. I got to go garage sale hunting. I actually have an idea, and I'm really excited about this. I think I'm going to make a trip to Eastern Washington to hang out with our mutual friend, Tyler, in Pullman. And I'm going to go hit pawn shops and see if they have old games. Because he's told me they do have old games at these pawn shops.
Oh,
and they're way cheaper than they should be. Like, they don't know the price of what they should be charging. And so I think I'm going to make a trip down this summer, like during the week, and go pawn shop hunting with him.
Yeah. I think rural pawn shops and like thrift stores are the best place to look for games. Because like if you go to a Goodwill in Los Angeles, like all the good stuff is gone. If it even makes it to the floor, it's gone instantly, right? And they know what they have, and they sell them online or they do whatever. But you go to like Palouse Treasures in Pullman, Washington.
Oh my
maybe don't know what they have. I bought a bunch of like Blizzard games there. I bought Diablo 2, Warcraft 3. This was like after I graduated college, so this was like 10 years ago now. But I bought a bunch of them there, and they were like 50 cents each or something stupid like that. Like, not that those games are incredibly expensive to buy anyway, but none of the codes had been used either, so I just linked them up to my Battle.net account. Oh man, it was great.
That's really cool. And also, like, that means that was just some college student. Like, well, I guess I'll go donate these before I move away from Pullman.
Yep.
And you benefited from their loss.
Still have those discs.
You got, I think PC discs are cool. I think I have Battlefront 2 for PC still, like the discs
that's
for
cool.
it. Because it's like, that's a cool game, and that's a game I really, really loved. I don't even have a disc drive on my computer, but if I did, I don't even think it would work.
Yeah. You know one thing that we haven't talked about when it comes to video game preservation, and this is more for like modern games, but all these games that are online only, they disappear, right? Like,
they're good as gone.
Right. Like old World of, and like there's like new versions of those games. Like World of Warcraft is still around, but you can't go back and play Wrath of the Lich King right now. And like World of Warcraft Classic exists, and it's on Burning Crusade now, I think, Classic, which is great, but it only exists because it's like economically viable. They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because there are people that will play the old version of the game. But like, think of like Star Wars Galaxies. That game's just gone. Think of Phantasy Star Online. That game's just gone. And the only way to play them now is through like fan projects that like preserve the servers of those games, like The Sims Online. I don't even know if anybody is making a custom server for The Sims Online, but
Matrix
it doesn't exist
Online.
anymore. Matrix Online, which shut down and is actually canon in the world of the Matrix, right? Like, and that matters now with the new Matrix movie. Like, actually references events that happened in the Matrix Online, and like those games just they don't exist outside of some janky like fan recreations of them, right? And so we think about older mobile games that never got updated and were left behind in some iPhone update or whatever. The servers don't exist anymore. Nobody plays them anymore. Nobody even maybe cares to play them anymore, or cares enough to rebuild them to make them run again. That's the kind of stuff that I'm sad we're losing, and there's just no way to get it back, you know?
Yeah, there's actually a YouTuber, very popular. People probably know him. The Spiffing Brit is his name. Have you heard of his
sounds
videos?
Familiar, yeah.
He did a whole episode recently on how a Total War game, I think it was Total War Arena is what it was called, was sold by the original publisher to this Chinese publisher. And then it had been running in China now for like 3 or 4 years, and people were playing it. And they're deleting it now, the servers. And once it's gone, it's gone. Can't, it's done. And he actually found a way to like get a localized English version of the game. It was this whole process. And he played one final multiplayer match with his Discord, and they played up until the servers were turned off permanently. Because they got the game, but you can't save it. If there's no servers running, it's not going to run. So it was just a nice video, but I'm like, it's true. It's so heartbreaking how games disappear. I think Driver San Francisco was gone for a while too, and that just came back. There's a bunch of games that are online that are just going to be gone. Honestly, like the multiplayer aspect of Call of Duty as it gets older, they're probably just going to get rid of them. They're not going to keep Call of Duty Ghosts online. No one plays Ghosts.
Right. And older like original Xbox games, Xbox Live just doesn't exist. So none of those games go online anymore. And like that's okay for a game like Halo 2, right? You can play it on Master Chief Collection. The game still exists, but like other games on the original Xbox, you just can't play them anymore online. Outside of maybe if they have a System Link feature, you can there are ways to like jankily play System Link games online. But like you said, like older Call of Duties, eventually they're going to turn them off, and that's going to be it. That'll just be the end.
Especially the bad history, like the Ghosts and the Advanced Warfares, the ones that didn't really hit as hard as they wanted.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised they still exist.
Those disappear. Yeah.
Yep. And that's a bummer. And as more and more games become these online services, there's just going to be like sort of an end to the games that people will be able to play. It'll be like in 50 years, you'll be able to play games up to about 2010 pretty reliably. And then after that, it's like, well, if they were mostly online and you want to play something from 2018 and it's the year 2060, like you can't, in 30 years, are we going to be able to show our kids our like Destiny 1? Probably not. They just won't be able to play it. We will never be able to share that with them.
I just saw someone post a video about like what Destiny 1 was really like. And I'm like, man, that was like not that long. That was 8 years ago. That's a weird thing. You know what I mean?
That's a little while ago. I mean, it depends on how old you are. If you're 20 years old, 8 years ago is when you were 12.
I guess that's true.
That's a long time.
Like, I have fond memories of Destiny 1 playing that for way too long by myself as a solo player, but I loved it. So also, I have a real quick thing here. There was some news this week. And since it's a discussion episode, I figured I could throw it out there. But it's the Embracer Group. Have you heard of them? They're a company based in Sweden. They actually are opening a games archive in Karlstad, Sweden. And this is a game publisher, by the way. And they currently have 50,000 games, consoles, and accessories. But they want to have complete everything, including regions. So they won't only have like all of the N64 collection for the North America. They'll have the PAL version of the N64 collection. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. If you're interested in this, I saw a GameSpot article on it, but you can also just go to Embracer.com, and that's their like website. And they also have some videos they posted about like making the collection and putting it together, and it's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. There was a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Nintendo, like NES, that was sold in certain countries. Like that was TMNT themed.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also, they have a in-box unopened Zelda Ocarina of Time N64.
Wow.
Which is really cool. Yeah.
I wanted that N64 so bad when it came out too.
Yeah, they have all sorts of stuff in box, like brand new, unopened copies of Legend of Zelda for NES. Just in box mint. Because they have unlimited budget to buy all this stuff.
That's
which
awesome.
I think is really cool. And then their whole idea is they're going to showcase it in exhibitions around the world. So maybe it'll come to a city near you and you can go look at all their cool stuff they have.
Nice.
I thought that was kind of a neat story since we were talking about backwards compatibility. But
Yeah.
anyway, Tyler, what you been playing? Let's do this before we get into 20 questions. What you been playing?
Destiny, and I fired up Majora's Mask 3D on my 3DS recently. So I played the first temple of that. I'm working through that. And then what I'm about to start, I think, if I can get a setup that I like, is I want to play the original Star Wars Dark Forces game, which is basically just Doom, but Star Wars themed. It came out like 95. So it's a first person shooter, but it's very Doom like. But I need to, like, I can play it on my PC. It runs in like DOSBox if you buy it on Steam. It's like a little jank. What I really want is to get it working on my handheld PC. So I'm still playing around with how exactly I'm going to get this thing going, but I want to play that game. I wish we could play it together. I wish I had like a co-op thing, but it doesn't, and it's 30 years old now, so there's no way to, like, there's no hacks for it or anything like that. But I want to play that. I kind of want to just play through that whole series: Dark Forces, Jedi Knight, Dark Forces 2, Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, and then Jedi Academy, I think.
Yeah, I was looking at those games too, especially when May the 4th rolls around and then all those go on sale on GOG, you know?
Yep.
They recently just had a bunch of Star Trek games go on sale, and I'm realizing now I think I missed the boat to get Star Trek Elite Force 1 and 2 that I wanted to get. Yeah, and they have a version that plays way better than the version I did when I tried to find the game, so...
Yeah, that's the best part about good old games is, like, when they sell a game, they're sort of guaranteed to run. Like, they do whatever they need to do to make it work on newer systems.
Yeah, which is awesome, and I'm a huge fan of them doing that. But I want to play those games. We still need to play, Tyler, that weird co-op Half-Life game that was PlayStation exclusive.
Oh, yeah, Decay.
We got to figure out how to get that running, because that would be really fun for us to run.
I think PS2 emulators have NetPlay on them, so maybe we can hack something together and play it over the internet together.
Yeah, we got. Let's work on that this week. That'd be fun. That'd be a fun little thing for us to play, because I would want to do that with you. And I think the game's only like 4 or 5 hours long.
Yeah,
super short.
It's pretty short. And I own it. I do own the disc of the original Half-Life. It sits on my shelf, so for PS2, so we can emulate it legally.
Nice, legal emulation. That's what we're all about on this podcast.
That's right.
So I've been playing Destiny 2, obviously, but I've also been playing with some friends Back 4 Blood. We haven't really talked about this.
Oh, yeah. It came out on Game Pass, and I kind of heard it was, like, not so great, and I just never played it. Is it good?
It's Left 4 Dead. It's good. It's Left 4 Dead. The card system, I think, is kind of weird, but it's got everything there. You know what I mean? It's got everything you want in it. It's fun. It's a good time. I think the card system is a little bit extra. You know, if it was just that without the card system, I think it would be fine. But when you figure out what's going on with the cards, it is kind of cool because it makes the game harder. I think that's kind of their response to the director that Valve had, is you pick these corruption cards that make the level harder. So there's cards that help you and cards that hurt you. It's pretty fun, though. I haven't beaten the game yet. I just kind of jump in with them on Sundays. We usually play on Sunday nights. And so it's been really fun. But yeah, I've been into that. So still working on other games, too. I kind of wanted to pick up The Witcher 3 again because it's been a while. And
your white whale.
My white whale. I'm going to play and beat this game. It's going to happen. You know what? That's what I'm going to do this week. I'm going to play that. I did start playing Jurassic World Evolution again, though, because they have the DLC for Jurassic World Dominion, the movie, that's coming out in a week or two. So,
oh boy,
love me some dinosaur games. And then I got all those N64 games. So here's the N64 games I got. I'm gonna try to list them off the top of my head. You ready?
Yeah.
Battle Tanks.
Okay.
Army Men, Air Fighters, Aerial Combat.
Oh, okay. Is that like the second one?
It's this own subgenre because it's the Army Men Sarge's Heroes games, which are phenomenal. And I also own Sarge's Heroes 1, and I loved it. I don't know what happened to that game. I got to go buy that cartridge too. And I want to do a series on the Army Men games because those were like a big part of my childhood. So I put that on there because that's my thing. But then War Gods, which is a fighting game, and I played one game of War Gods and I won, and I think I'm going to go 1-0 for life in War Gods and never play that game again.
I don't think I've ever heard of that game.
It was trying to be like Mortal Kombat. It's not great, but it's gods because you can tell they didn't want to pay any licensing fees, so I was like Anubis. There's Aero Fighters, which is a whole separate like jet game. I didn't really play that much. Superman 64, though. I got that. Oh,
yeah.
It booted. I haven't played it yet. I know it's bad. I'm going to play it at some point.
You're going to beat it. Play the whole game. I think it's actually unfinishable.
Yeah, it's because there's no like real good save checkpoints in it.
Yeah.
What else did I get? I have the list right here. I'm going to make paper noises on the podcast. This is inappropriate. Pokemon Snap. Told you about that one.
Uh-huh.
Pokemon Stadium. I got that.
Ooh.
Star Fox 64.
Oh,
and then
nice.
FIFA 64. Glover, which I've also heard is terrible.
Oh, I love that game, but it's terrible. Yeah, it's bad.
Oh, it's Aero Fighters Assault is that game I was talking about. But here's the one I'm most excited about because this is legitimately a good game. Turok 2 Seeds of Evil.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've heard that game's actually really like a gem of the N64 that I need to actually play. So I'm pretty stoked about that. But I bought these games and they all work. A couple of them I thought were broken and then I blew some compressed air to get all the dust out and they worked fine.
All right.
Pretty stoked. But then I realized the biggest problem I have currently is all of those Nintendo 64 save packs have gone bad. The ones that I have.
Oh, no.
So I'm wondering if there's like a third-party save pack I need to buy online.
Probably.
New.
Not many games use that, though, right?
Most of the games I got use it.
Really? Oh,
yeah.
That's a bummer. I thought most games are like they save to the cartridge.
But the most beautiful thing I found is looking through my old stuff. I saved all the instruction booklets.
Nice.
And I found the notes, because sometimes in the back they'd have like a notes section for you to write down cheat codes. And I found my old notes for like Army Men, Sarge's Heroes of the cheat codes that I would type
awesome.
in. And I was like, this is just filling my heart with joy. I love it so much. So that was it's been a fun week just looking at those. And I also found out that my TV in my living room, which is not like the TV we got when we moved in, has the old video inputs.
Nice.
So I don't even need to buy like a RetroTink. It looks terrible because it's on a flat screen, but it still works. So I could just play it, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, something I want to do when I have more space in a place where I live after I move is I want to get like a nice CRT that I can just play old games on. I had one at my parents' house. We had like this Trinitron that did 1080i. It probably weighed 500 pounds, and I don't think that's an exaggeration. And it was like the best tube TV you could get, and they had to get rid of it because it was too big. And I don't know. I think I ended up throwing it away. I don't even think anybody wanted to take it because it was so heavy. But I want to get something like that where it's like you can play those old games on a real CRT where they look the best. That's
true. Yeah, I've heard that CRT monitors also are kind of making a comeback with like retro game people because it's like something about frame rate refreshing, right, is really good on those.
Yeah, some of the older CRTs would do like 75 or maybe even 90 hertz refresh rate if you ran them at like lower resolutions, which is kind of cool. So like that's fun for gaming, I guess, on like a PC where like a Super Nintendo is still only going to run at 60 hertz. But yeah, I think that's a nice way to do that in like a smaller package too. I almost picked up a free Apple Studio monitor CRT. It was like 17 inches. That would have been so cool to have, except for it was broken. And I looked up like how to fix it. And it's rooting around inside an old CRT. If you don't know what you're doing, you can actually die doing that. Like the voltages that are going on in there that get saved in there, even after you've unplugged it, are very dangerous. So I decided that maybe that was not a repair project I wanted to take on, but I would really love to get one of those.
I think we can all agree death by CRT monitor is probably the nerdiest way to die.
Yeah, if I gotta go, maybe that's the way.
That's it. That's how you do it. Well, are you ready to play 20 questions, Tyler?
Oh, yeah.
I have this game for you. You know this game.
Okay, I know this game.
You should know this game, yes.
Okay, was it after the year 2000 published?
No.
Was it published on a cartridge?
No.
Okay. So it's a disc game. Was this a PlayStation game?
No.
Was this a Dreamcast game?
No. You're at 4 questions.
Was this a Saturn game?
No.
Oh, man.
You're at 5 questions.
It was not a PlayStation game, Saturn game, or Dreamcast game, but it was published before the year 2000. What other disc systems were around that I know of? Jaguar wasn't disc-based, was it?
Wait, time out. I'm going to give this to you because I realized we didn't go over the rules. This is a PC game. Can I do that?
Oh.
Sorry, I just realized you were stuck in the mindset of it being I know this is helping him, listeners, okay, but I just realized we didn't clarify the rules. I thought we could do PC games, so
I think we can. Yeah, I didn't think of it. I would just call that my bad.
What I'm going to do for that hint, I'm just going to mark it as a question, like as if you asked.
As if I asked, was this a PC game? Yeah, I would have got there eventually, I think.
So then the 6 is you're at 6 now.
Okay, yeah, I would have got
Sorry, I realized we didn't clarify that, and I was worried that you're only thinking game systems, and we would have been stuck here forever, and I would have ruined it.
Okay, but PC game, was it released after, well, if it's on a CD, I guess they're all. Was this game released after 1995?
Yes.
Okay, so between 95 and 2000, that's 7. Is this game a first-person shooter?
No.
Okay.
You're at 8 questions now.
Is this game a real-time strategy game?
Yes.
Okay, real-time strategy between 95 and 2000. Is this game in the Command and Conquer series?
No.
Okay.
I feel like when I say no in this game, I'm more of like a no. It's a voice I'm putting on.
Yeah. Well, it can't be Warcraft because Warcraft 2 was like 94. And Warcraft 3 was 2001. Is this game in the StarCraft series?
Yes.
Is this game StarCraft?
Yes.
Great. Could have been that or Brood War, I guess.
Oh, that's funny. I just didn't know. And I also realized because StarCraft 64 came out later. So it was originally released on PC in March 31st of 1998. So I don't know if I should have helped you there, but I just felt like a real
That's
jerk.
Okay. I would have sat there and thought for a long time about what consoles also had CDs, and then I would have been like, oh, duh, PC, and then we would have got there. So I don't.
I'm just worried we're going to get an email like, hey, Mike, you're taking it too easy on your friend Tyler.
Yeah, well, you know what? You can have a full refund on this podcast if you think you're taking it easy on me.
Full refund. Rad. So next week, we're going to do a separate episode on a game series that we both enjoy, and that's what I'm going to throw out there.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But we've kind of talked, and we've decided the next book we're going to do. Do you want to announce the book?
Oh, sure. The book, I think we've talked about it a bunch of times and as something that we should do, but the book that we're going to do is Console Wars by Blake Harris. And I like this book a lot because it focuses on a specific time period of like the console wars between Sega and Nintendo in like the late 80s, early 90s that I think is a lot of fun. It has some of the best advertisements and like some of the best like playground console fights of all time. So this is a great book that covers people that worked at Nintendo. It kind of follows pretty heavily Tom Kalinske, the CEO of Sega of America at that time, from when he gets brought on after working at Mattel on Barbie stuff into making Sega really awesome. And then once he leaves, things don't go as well. That's a really good book. And there is, if you don't want to read the book, there is a movie you can watch. There's a documentary that's sort of based on the same storyline called Console Wars that you can check out as well. So you can follow along that way. But I love this book, and I'm excited for us to bring it on and talk about it in our little book club format.
Yeah, so next week we'll just do a episode on that game series that we enjoy. I'm not going to announce it yet because it's a surprise. And then we'll start the book, I think, the week after that. So that gives people time to decide if they want to read the book or they want to watch the movie or how you want to do it, because
that sounds great.
We're going to book club format it. Probably not going to be as long as the Ultimate History of Video Games, honestly.
No,
I have no idea how many episodes, but that was a lot of episodes. So
yeah, I don't think we should do one that long very often, but I think smaller books like Console Wars, where we can do it in probably 5 or 6 weeks, will be fun. I don't know if that's how long it'll be, but
I think it'll be really fun. I'm super excited. My goal, I told Tyler this off air, that I want to just have a whole shelf that's all video game history books. That's all I want, and I'm really excited for this. So we'll do that next week. As always, if you want to send us an email, you can send us an email at codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com. You can join our Discord by either sending us an email or going to my Twitter at mecoletta, MECOLETTA, and clicking on the pinned tweet at the top of my profile. That is a link that never expires. And Tyler is also on Twitter at SneakerElf, ELPH. And with that, I think that'll do it for today. You want to say bye to everybody, Tyler?
Goodbye, everybody.